That was good.
All right, I'm gonna call this meeting to order officially because we want to not have them 2-hour meetings, we hope, even though that's what they keep saying. My brain explodes after about an hour or so. And so I'll turn it over to Greg to kind of get things going.
Okay, I want to welcome everybody here. And I thought there's some people here that weren't here the last time when we met. So I thought we might go around the room and introduce ourselves. We won't necessarily go through our bios as we did the time before. But I'll start with Greg Williams.
John Anderson.
Mario Torres.
Ramsey Park.
I'm Betty Shem. Susie Patterson.
I'm Ann Keenan.
I'm G.W. Neal.
Beverly Sosa.
I'm Amelia Fisher.
Brandy Cartwright. Perky Beisel. Marissa Brown.
Jessica Sauer.
Smith.
That's our,
And we got a whole bunch of other city folks in the back, but you know all them, so we'll let them slide this time.
Do want to remind each of you that this meeting is being recorded. So just know that.
Get started, just wanted to visit a little bit. I mean, you had your first committee meeting and it didn't long, and everybody downtown thinks we're closing the roads again like they did in 1974. And this is every committee group think, and all those kind of things. So I just wanted to take a couple of minutes and remind you that we weren't asked to run a sprint here. We're here to do a marathon. This takes some time. We're not going to get in a hurry, especially the first couple of meetings. It's going to be more about kind of getting to know the background and preparing us to have some intense discussions, building a little bit of camaraderie and knowing who each other is, and kind of getting some synergy going. So this is going to take a couple of meetings before we really start getting into any kind of nitty gritty type stuff. And, if you look at this committee, it is unique and odd and eclectic and empowering and invigorating, a unique little group of folks. That was by design. I mean, we know that on our own committee, there are people that don't think there should be residents downtown, and there are people that think that we should have all business buildings downtown and no retail, and people that think, there's all kinds of diversified opinions here, which is what we want, really and truly. Because at the end of the day, our downtown is the setting, and we're in the next couple of meetings actually going to see past plans and study them. And we're even going to take a walking tour eventually downtown to see some things that maybe you've overlooked. But the reality of it is, because of what you believe and the perspective and things you come from previously, a lot of us can see the exact same thing 2 different ways. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. We hope at the end to see one picture, but at the beginning, we're going to see different pictures. For instance, if you look up here, don't say anything, but some of you see it up. And some of you see a rabbit. Same exact picture, but just depending on how you glanced up there, you saw it one way or the other. So if that's the duck, maybe it's not. Maybe it's a rabbit. You see the body and the head and the ears off to the left and the nose to the right, or you see the duck with the bill off to the left and the eye off to the right. Same exact thing. So we've all lived in Nacogdoches, interacted in Nacogdoches, seen downtown. We have a way we look at it depending on our frame of reference. And what this committee is going to do over the next 9 to 14 months, depending on how life goes, we're going to try to take all of those perceptions and see if there's really a more accurate and clear picture of what our downtown section can look like in the future. So I hope, in fact, we have differing opinions. It's vibrant when that happens. I spend every day dealing with people that have different opinions. It doesn't bother me at all. We get some scrapping going on in here and discussions as long as we're professional and respect each other's opinion. I think at the end of this, we're going to see something more clearly that we all can kind of at least get some consensus on. So today, we're going to do a few things. We're going to learn a little bit about really and truly what strategic planning is. We're going to look at a little bit of the resources and tools that the city is able to give us and provide us, which will lead to a lovely holiday homework assignment for you when you're bored and wanting something to read. And then we're going to learn a little bit about, how we want to go about in our next meetings and some of the plans that we have. So I think to get it kicked off today, let's talk a little bit about the principles of long-range planning, kind of long-range planning 101. And for that, we're going to use Larissa.
So I'm gonna try to make this more interesting than it sounds, okay? Some of you have maybe heard this presentation from me before, but it's changed a little bit to focus on downtown. First, talk about why we plan. That sentence up there summarizes it, I think, pretty well. Let's break it down into those pieces though, to realize that common values vital to our individual and community well-being. So comment. We want to reach consensus. That's something that Mario talked about in our first meeting. It may not be what I believe, it may not be what you believe, but it's essentially something that we can hopefully both agree on. Values, so that's protecting, enhancing, growing the way we live and work and enjoy the city. Individual and community, I think that's important too. Just like I said, it's may not be the best for me. It may not be the best for Betty, but hopefully it's the best for us together as a community. And then realize, that word realize there has two definitions. It's as in observe and be aware of the city, but then also kind of manifesting the way we want the city to be and downtown to be in the future. Let's skip some of this stuff. So this isn't anything new. We've done this for millennia. I know Perky here is familiar as a history professor with what I'm talking about, but we've always planned our cities. As soon as we started moving together as human beings, we started doing things that resembled city planning. Eventually, kings and queens took it over and kind of formalized the process a little bit more. But we've planned in this country for hundreds of years. Washington, D.C. is a perfect example of that. What a beautiful city that is. What a beautiful city this is. This is Nacogdoches, downtown Nacogdoches. It's an early plat, a Sanborn map of Nacogdoches. This didn't happen by accident. This was very thoughtfully planned out. And we owe it to the people that spent so much time and energy and effort planning our downtown to continue that and to continue the work that they did. So the planning process. The same if you're planning a meal, if you're planning a party, you're planning a business, or you're planning a city or a downtown. The first thing you do is assess. So we take a look at where we are right now. What have we done in the past? What was successful? What wasn't successful? How have we changed since the last time we planned? We've changed a lot since we planned downtown last in the mid-70s. Where are we as a community? What are our current goals and things? Then we start to talk about the future, and that's really where we are in this process. Hopefully, if we are able to work with a consultant, they'll spend a couple of months kind of doing that assessing part with demographic data and market data and things like that, and they'll come back and talk to you guys. And then this is where the meat of what we will do in this committee is start thinking about what we want to be like in the future. It's that manifesting how we want our city to be in the future and how we want to grow. But it doesn't stop it. Then, once we have a plan, we have to formalize that ways to make that plan happen. We need to have rules, land development rules, zoning rules, things like that. Funding. We need to find a way to fund the things that we want to do. So that will be a continuing process. And then we have to employ those regulations. So if we adopt a new building regulation, our city staff has to, downtown has to work with Ramsey and his family to ensure that we're helping you meet those new building codes downtown, for example. So one thing that I think is very important in all of these processes, be it downtown or the city as a whole, is balance. That balance could be, like I was saying earlier, that we're balancing the needs of each other versus my own independent wishes. I think it's important that we balance our environmental benefits, our social benefits, so that's essentially our quality of life, and our economic benefits. If we set up a set of rules and regulations that leans in any one direction, those other two things are going to suffer. So I'm an economic developer, so of course I'm very interested in that economic side. But I completely understand if we make it we throw all the rules out the window and say, come on in, just build what you want, do what you want, we want your business here, those social and environmental issues are going to suffer. And it goes the same direction. If we say we've got to protect everything pristinely, we don't want one stick of new building anywhere, we just want to stay in this bubble, economically, we're going to suffer. And so we all kind of understand that, but as we get into discussion, it's just good to keep in the back of our minds. So as we move through this process, hopefully over the next couple of months, probably a couple of years, not a couple of months, these things are all happening. There is another committee, as you know, that's working on the comprehensive plan. So that's down here. This comprehensive plan talks to all these other codes and plans. So you guys are on the historic preservation kind of downtown group. These development codes, these are our zoning ordinances, our subdivision ordinances, our land development codes. If the comprehensive plan group comes out and says, we want Nacogdoches to be very walkable, we want you to be able to walk out your front door of your house and walk to go buy a sandwich down the street. And we've got a lot of work to do as far as our land development codes and our zoning ordinances go. It would never say this in a million years, but if that comprehensive plan group and you guys come together and say, we're tired of living in the past, we don't want to deal with this historic preservation stuff anymore, we've got a lot of work to do with our codes and ordinances. Another one on here is our capital improvements plans. You've probably heard a lot about that recently, and the fact that we've got a lot of great needs in capital improvements. We've got a lot of aging infrastructure. It's important now that we establish priorities and that we establish land use patterns, future development patterns, so that we can plan out those capital improvements. So our water lines, our sewer lines, our fire stations, police stations, things like that. And then economic development ties into all of those things. I and my organization of NEDCO really takes all of these things into consideration when we're doing our work. If Nacogdoches is a tourist-friendly college town, we're not going to start recruiting, trying to become the next meatpacking district in downtown. We want to make sure that what we do as economic developers complement what the rest of the town is doing. So a little bit about what comprehensive planning and downtown planning is and is not. It's not static. Just because we all write it today, if there is a cataclysmic event in 5 years, that doesn't mean we can't change the plan to update it to more modern issues. It tries to stay at 30,000 feet. So it's not going to assign new zoning to every lot in town. It might suggest, look at your zoning ordinances and make changes to it, but it won't rezone the whole town. It's not a replacement for market forces. We're not going to get a Nordstrom's in downtown Nacogdoches because we adopt a downtown master plan. It's not a force for immediate change. It's a long-term thing that we are working with. So we are planting seeds for our children, for the trees that our children are going to see in the future in many, many years. Not a silver bullet. We've got a lot of issues to address. And it's not always gigantic changes. It could be very small incremental changes. It is an identification of needs. And I think probably everybody in here, because you volunteered for this committee, is a problem solver. And it's really easy when we're discussing needs and things to go, okay, let's talk about that solution right now. It's not necessarily where we are. At this point in the process, we are talking about our needs and our wishes, not really the solutions to those needs and wishes. It's obviously a process to determine our goals and priorities. It's dreaming. It's, you know, what do we want to be and who do we want to be? Do we want to be a retirement town? Do we want Nacogdoches downtown to be an entertainment destination? Do we want it to be a high-tech hub? Do we want it to be, you know, an office destination? Do we want it to be all those things? And then it's also a balancing act to make sure that we don't fall too far in any one direction and affect all of those things on that list. So downtown planning is a little different than the larger comprehensive planning that's going on at the same time. You guys get to focus on a very specific boundary, with very limited scope, and that's helpful. You can have a little bit more in-depth focus. I said the comprehensive plan doesn't look at lot by lot zoning. A downtown plan can get pretty specific and really get a little bit more in the weeds than a comprehensive plan can. It can have a focus on activities and events. For example, in the comprehensive plan, they don't get to talk about things like that, about human activity on the street level, or specific businesses that we want in Nacogdoches. So the downtown plan is much more specific. It has more of an economic focus. We can talk about things like tenant mixes and things like that. It deals with architecture and marketing, and those are all things that really the comprehensive plan won't be able to do because it's on such a higher level. So I wanted also to just kind of run through the life cycle of downtowns in general and specifically our downtown in Nacogdoches. Was developed, downtowns in general in Texas, specifically ours too, was developed anywhere from the 1800s to about the 1920s. We were building. Had a period of stability from about the 20s to about World War II. And then when everybody came home from the war and they were fresh with these new skills and new jobs and cars, downtowns kind of started to decline. As every house had a car, we started to build suburbs a little bit of ways from town. We started to build grocery stores, and it was kind of this romantic vision of mom getting to go to the clean, nice, pretty new grocery store a couple miles away from downtown instead of the general store where she used to go buy her bread and sugar. For some reason, and I don't know why, we decided that we needed to modernize downtowns, maybe to try to draw the attention back and wanted to look like they were fresh and new too, so we did this. Then, in about the 80s or 90s, we all woke up and went, why in the world did we cover up those beautiful, beautiful buildings? What in the world were we thinking? I specifically chose pictures not from Nacogdoches, by the way. The Texas Downtown Association, Texas Historic Preservation Commission, and specifically in Nacogdoches, we had a bunch of groups that became interested in revitalizing Nacogdoches, revitalizing our downtown, fixing up those buildings, renovating the square. And that work really has continued through 2020 with different life cycles along the way. We are unique and we are beautiful, but the cycle of our downtown is really not unique. Everybody in Texas has faced a similar situation where it was the thriving center of downtown and we turned our back on her. And now it's time to turn back. We've had a period of growth over the last 20 years, I think, that's been great. But now we're at a point where we're ready to get even better. So with that, I'm gonna turn it back over to Lauren. Any questions? Sorry.
I wanted to say one thing about planning. I think planning is the way to go, nothing against planning, but I know that towns may start off with a plan, but then they grow kind of organically, right? Just kind of like, oh, depending what people do, which is kind of what happens in North Street, right? It just, that wasn't planned, that just kind of happened because, oh, I can sell my house for this much money and someone wants to put a store there and off they went. But anyway, I just said that even though we start with the plans, there's an organic thing to it that I think is worth paying attention to because the way things grow, like incrementally and organically, you put a little, if this works and things spread out a little bit from downtown like that. And so just paying attention to that, that's some of the strong town stuff I've read, but I think it's really interesting.
Absolutely. And the strong town stuff that you mentioned is great. It is. If you all are interested in strong town stuff, org is a great resource for you to look at. I think it goes back to what we were talking about with what the market will exactly. We can have grand plans, but if the overall market doesn't respond to them, we won't be able to realize them. The city can't accomplish this all on its own. We've got to have realistic vision that the private market can respond to.
Exactly.
It's kind of funny as you sit around this table, we have people that have businesses downtown. We have school district folks that there's a school just 3 blocks from Main Street. We've got homes downtown, business buildings downtown. And yet I venture to say if we were to all right now write down our definition of what is downtown, there wouldn't be the same in here. Somebody would encroach a little bit, well, the farmer's market is part of it. Well, no, it's not, and this and that. And so to talk a little bit about the boundaries of downtown, and to be honest, we don't know them for sure right now because they're different overlays, historic overlay, et cetera, like that. So Brian's going to spend a little time kind of telling us what's out there and helping us begin to understand what downtown may be.
You can tell from the list that we're not giving you any answers, we're giving or, and that's the same thing for our boundaries. If I was to give each of you a map and say, circle what down, we probably have at least 10 different varieties of maps. And they'd all be correct, because it all depends on whether you're seeing a duck or a rabbit. What is your interest at the time when you're looking at that map? And because each of you have different interests, as we go through this planning process, that's going to help define what we as a committee, or you as a committee rather, feel that downtown area is. And some of the maps that we have today, and all of these are in your binder, but they're really kind of small because these are meant to be printed, you know, like the size these up here behind me. But this is our National Register District. So the perspective from this one is the period of significance of architecture. So this is architectural based. When a recommendation was made to the National Park Service in 2007, we hired a consultant and they came in and they looked at what is the period of significance architecturally for your downtown. They came back with it was 1890 to kind of 1920, 1930 period. So then the consultants tried to draw a circle of contiguous buildings, that the greatest concentration of those buildings, and that's where we came up with this red. So you can see over pointer. So over here, this is the railroad depot, just for your perspective. And we have the main street running through here, and this is Mound Street. And up here is Fredonia Hotel, and that's the Mize Factory building. And down here is Festival Park. Those are kind of your west, east, north, and south boundaries. But this was just architectural based. And it's an accurate map for downtown for architecture. So the next one is local historical. So that first one, this one doesn't have any regulatory purposes. This is simply a line on a map. If you have a building within this district and you're a national register, that doesn't mean there's any extra layer that you have to go through to do something. This one does. This is your local historic overlay district. Easy, it's fairly similar. We still have the railroad depot over here. We have Mize Factory up here, Festival Park, except, oh wait, this one doesn't stop at Mound. It goes all the way over to University Drive over here. And the reason why it's broken is there are some gaps. So how can we have a contiguous district that has holes in it? Because when the city did historic overlay, we asked the property owners, gave permission to the property owners to not be included. And so if you see gaps, like in here, these property owners said, hey, we don't want to be in the historic overlay, so that's why it's cut out. That's just to give you an explanation.
Methodist Church.
Yes, this is the Methodist Church right here. The Durst Taylor Museum is the first property, and then the Mize Factory. Oh, there's Mize Factory right there.
And Brian, isn't there like another historical overlay? Because I'm in a historical overlay, but it's just not the downtown one.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct. So there are 5 National Register historic overlay districts in the city. Downtown is the only one that doesn't conform exactly the same. So downtown, we have the National Register boundary, which is different than your local historic overlay. But when you get to the Zion Hill District, the Virginia Avenue, the Washington Square, those boundaries all match up. Downtown is unique yet again. And then this one is your Main Street program. So it doesn't look at architecture like the first two. The Main Street is programmed, it's oriented. So it kind of makes sense that this one's very linear. This one is like almost like a perfect rectangle. It goes from, it goes from Douglas right here. This is Main Street. It runs all the way through over here to University with a little jog that captures. And then this one shows all 3 of them. These are commonalities, and so the heart of downtown, everybody says yes, that's included. But then when you kind of get out here, maybe not, maybe not up here, same thing up this way. Jessica's going to go through the 3 plans that were given today. And each of those have different boundaries from these. So the downtown 1974 plan goes from North Street to Mound. And then from Hospital to Pilsen. That's included in here. The 1998 Heritage Plan focuses a lot on the depot area, which is right over here. And this is Bonita Creek Park, kind of focuses on this area. And that mainly goes from Old Tyler to Mountain. And then the streetscape from 2017, that's mainly downtown the square, right? So remember, as you drive around this holiday season and before our next meeting, and as you go through the months in this process, pay attention to what other cities have. Do they have major gateways? Is that something that we need to have a gateway up here, or is it here, or is it, where does that fall? So look at the other cities that you go through and think about how that might apply to Nacogdoches as Jessica goes through her plan.
Do we have any questions before we let Ryan leave? I are gonna ask some hard geography questions. All right. So what I'm gonna do is summarize the plans. One of the plans, the 1974 downtown master plan, all we're given last time was the big square shaped binder. And then the other 2 I handed out today. So they're whole plans ready to go in your binder. They're yours to keep, so feel free to mark them up, make notes, ask questions, that sort of thing. So our first plan, the 1974 plan, looks like this. I'm going to summarize a little bit, but try not to tell y'all too much of, what was recommended, what I love about it, because I want y'all to assessments. And of course, everything John says, 1974 plan, y'all did such good work on this. It's just a little complicated, and so we need to start looking at some of these things. So the 1974 plan was done by Marvin Springer and Associates, urban planners out of Dallas. So this plan kind of starts with an economic analysis of Nacogdoches by comparing dates and populations from 1960 to 1970. And then they even extrapolate what the population of Nacogdoches will look like in 1990 and kind of how downtown will be used. A lot of the populations were correct. A lot of the, household income, stuff like that actually matched pretty well. So they did a good job analyzing Nacogdoches and projecting what we would look like. They also go over the physical status of downtown, what the boundaries are at the time, things like we don't have enough signage, which I think people now is still an issue. So they really look at downtown and what our physical status is. It's kind of funny reading back on it now because a lot of it talks about traffic patterns and forcing people to go downtown. When we finally extend University Drive to the loop, we should do this. And now when we read it in 2020, it's like, oh, well, that happened a long time ago and we've accomplished a lot of these things, which is great. It also talks about building conditions, the same things we deal with now, that buildings are great, they're beautiful, historic. We have a lot of empty ones that we need to fill up. It also identifies some streets that would be better as pedestrian streets. Streets we still look at today as far as Commerce and Church, they're not really big enough for traffic, could they be used for pedestrians? And then the 2 main suggestions were convert Main Street into less parking, more walkability, more pedestrian access, or closing Main Street and making it a Main Street mall. So that way there would be no parking, no traffic, and it's essentially given back to the people. So that's what we have in the 74 plan. Are there any questions about that? Because y'all had a little bit more time to read that one.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
It's very interesting. It's got a lot of good suggestions in there.
Yes, huh?
The other plan is a heritage development plan from 1998. This plan, I will mention, is not specifically a downtown plan. It was done by Texas A&M, some of their grad students and some of their professors. It's the Texas A&M Department of Landscape, Architecture, and Urban Planning. So what they did is they came and looked at downtown and Main Street, Highway 21, and then Highway 59. Gave assessments of what's great in town, what needs some work, and then some very specific suggestions. Some of the things they talked about was Nacogdoches has several buildings that have not been properly maintained and several that are empty. Historic structures have been enclosed with siding and other materials like the slip covers that Larissa showed. We have made great strides to remove the vast majority of those downtown, so that's been wonderful. Some businesses that should be downtown are not there, like restaurants. And then the biggest problem downtown is that there's no clear direction on how to get there or where it starts. So it's funny that a lot of these things identified along the way. And we haven't had a big overarching plan, that's been updated in a long time. So we know some of the issues, we just haven't identified, here's all the issues, here's how to update them, and then here's your marching orders essentially. It also gives some, recommendations. And like I mentioned, this isn't all downtown. So it gives recommendations on, we shouldn't have temporary signing in Nacogdoches, which now we have an ordinance against that. So a lot of these things were taken, into consideration by staff and were used. It also focuses a lot on a Bonita Creek promenade. Over near the depot, they suggest totally developing that, making more shopping there. Things like that were not done. I think a lot of it's because they were in the floodplain. So maybe not the best place for some of the parking and buildings and things like that. So this one also looked at 1997 through 2000. So again, a lot of great suggestions, but in need of an update. Are there any questions about that one? I know we all have read everything. Okay. And our most recent plan is a Main Street streetscape plan, which is very hard to say for some reason. This one was done in 2017 by the Texas Main Street Department. This is something, it's a benefit of having a Main Street district in downtown and having a Texas Main Street program, is we can request things like this from the state. We can also request design requests when there's specific buildings that an owner wants. So this was requested by staff. It was written by the THC staff. It's got a lot of great recommendations, but this report, which you have, starts off with, here's recommendations. You need to have a downtown master plan. You need to do some of these things in accordance with this plan, and there needs to be public outreach. So they mentioned, here's recommendations, but don't just rely on our little streetscape study, things like that. Take this with a grain of salt and then bring it potentially back to the public. But this plan also is not a big overarching plan. It's more of a, here's what to do with your sidewalks and with your square. It doesn't talk about traffic patterns all that much. It doesn't talk about people that live downtown. Doesn't really talk about programming. It's more of those hardscapes that they look at. Some of the things they talk about is repair, level, and repave damaged sidewalks, which I think we can all agree on. But some of the thing with that is that you repair sidewalks, you fix them, you level them, but it should be done with a big overarching master plan, because what if your master plan says, really, we need to widen the sidewalk? You just fixed it 6 months ago because it was broken. So a lot of it's like, you should be doing these things, but first you need to have a bigger plan and a bigger goal. They also talk about testing out ideas, which is used a lot in a lot of Main Street cities, especially during COVID. A lot of cities created these temporary parklets where they would take 6 parking spots and they would set up temporary little parks that you could eat in, and test out these ideas before you spend a ton of money putting these in place. So that's one of the suggestions. Also resolve ADA access, because if you've been downtown, you'll notice that there are huge drop-offs, which of course is a problem for everybody, but they're especially not ADA compliant. And then consider creating shared streets to where you give these streets back to the public. So this has been a common theme from 1974 through 2017, that, hey, there's some streets that aren't used as much as they could be, either for pedestrians or they're used too much for traffic, are really used the best. So that's one of the other things they bring up. Do y'all have any questions about any of these?
I have a quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
Explain what is the downtown master program in Texas? What are downtown streets? I know I've heard that references to that. I don't really know what that
As
is.
far as like the Texas Main Street program?
Yes.
So the Main Street program is, there's a federal level program, and then Texas also has its own division. So what the Main Street program does, it's an economic tool to help main streets and downtown regions thrive. So what we do is we help building owners when they're trying to restore buildings. We help businesses when they're trying to figure out, I need a business plan. I need to figure out what the economics are of downtown. They have several different staff members that you can reach out to and say, I need to know who lives in this area and how do I market my business? Or what should I accept? What kind of families live here? Things like that. We also do a lot of programming like the wine swirl, down Christmas lights, things like that. So it's a lot of quality of life events, but then also a lot of real help for downtown business owners, building owners, things like that.
So it's just a state program that we kind of participate in.
Yeah, we participate, Texas, or Nacogdoches is one of the longest standing members. We've been a Texas Main Street city since the 80s. And it's helped a lot of business owners when they say, I want to, or building owners especially, when they say, I have this great historic building, I don't really know how to restore it. And so we can send them a few pictures to the state. And, you know, John wants to put in a restaurant, and then they send us back this huge recommendation on, here's what you do to your building.
Wow,
And it's all free to them just because we're a member.
cool, I like that. Okay.
Any other questions?
Thanks, Larissa, Brian, and Jessica for giving us a little information there. Want to talk a little bit, we're gonna have some interaction here in a second, but kind of showing you how we'll be moving forward. We decided last time that January 12th, the second Wednesday of each month will be kind of our standard meeting at about 10:30. That way we can get out in time to go teach classes and pick up kids and things like that. So make sure you go on and for the next year or so, block that time out so that we can get some consistency in those folks that can be here.
Can I say something? Because I was thinking about that when we were gone, and I know that the meetings are going to be open to the public and people might want to come. And I just thought maybe, maybe we should have it in the evening when working people can come. I don't know if that was a consideration. Or maybe, I know I agree that consistency is going to be great to keep it, but, we might want to consider at some point maybe switching to evenings.
Yeah, I mean, suppose that we get
Something to think about.
under our belt, looking at different times. I also think, Ann, that as we move forward and we have ideas, we'll all be charged with going and almost hosting some other meetings, that are at.
It could be different times, yeah.
Back and input and things of that sort. And I'll also remind you and I'm probably going to be the first one to blow this, that it's all recorded, so don't say anything stupid. Like you want to, I'm a guy that always says some stupid things, so that'll be fine. But
We need to encourage people to watch these if they're interested too, yeah.
so we might be able to look at that as we move along.
Okay. Thank you.
What we're going to do, between now and next time, I got a couple of little homework assignments I'd like you to do. We're going to take a couple of meetings from now, we're actually going to do a walking tour downtown. Because there's a lot of things that if you don't walk around downtown, the whole downtown, you got your little spots you go and you get used to going, you might not have ever noticed. I'll give you an example. When I first went to work for the bank, my office was the east corner of the building. And it wasn't until I sat in there that I realized that the street makes a little jag there. And if some 18-wheeler ever were to miss that red light, I was a dead man. And I would have never noticed that unless I had to spend some time in that spot. But I would encourage you to drive around downtown between now and our next meeting, not just Main Street. Make every side street, see which way the traffic flows, see I promise you, we've been here cumulatively hundreds of years among us, and I promise you can't drive through downtown if you take every little street and not see something that you don't go, I've never noticed that before. And so I encourage you to take a little driving tour on your own downtown. It's holidays, so a lot of us are going to go see family and be on the road and things of that sort. You drive by lots of towns on the interstate and you never get off and take 10 minutes to drive down through one of those little towns. If you don't mind, when you're traveling around between now and the next time we come together, schedule an extra 15 minutes to make a right-hand exit and drive through a downtown section, see what you see, get back on the interstate, keep going on to where you got to go. But I think we'll get some new perspectives if we do that. You've been given tons of plans here, and if you're like me and you need it blown up bigger, I'll remind you that these plans are out there at, Nacogdoches, I wrote it down.
Nacogdochesplans.com.
Yeah, nacogdochesplans.com. That's a hard one to remember. nacogdochesplans.com, and you can go blow them up and see them, and they're a little easier to work with if you're like me.
So nacogdochesplans.com.
Plans with an S, nacogdochesplans.com, and that'll give you something to be able to go out there and look at. And so those are your homework assignments. Read all the plans. A perfect example is we all got the 1974 plan. Some of you may have read it. I did read it, and I was stunned. at some of the things that were in there. I mean, I'm really surprised that in 1974, nothing personal, that was pretty advanced thinking, really. And we didn't do all that. And they won't do all of our plan either, but they'll do some of it. So, and the last thing I'd like to do before we kind of wrap up, if there's any questions, and by the way, they're not mad. They all told me that other meetings they had to go to. If they're not cussing and throwing something down on the way out the door, it's all fine. While we were going through this today, I bet most of us had a thought like this. I wonder if we ever thought about doing this or doing that. So I'd like to, and these aren't things we're necessarily going to do, but I'd like you just to go around the room and I'd like each one of you to share one of those. I wonder if. Have we ever thought about this or have we ever thought about that? And Brenda, you're nodding, so I'm going to start.
I know, right?
Wrote it down. Have we ever thought about putting a bridge across Bonita Creek so that people can walk from downtown to the railway station and to the Auntie Costa's?
Jessica, you writing these sit down?
Right?
That's also in the background.
Okay, yeah, I think somebody was taking care of me because we couldn't read my handwriting if I wrote it. That's really interesting, and we've seen that. I mean, I just saw something on the news where San Antonio has a land bridge and animals are even crossing it, so it's kind of interesting. Shay, let's just go on around if we can.
Well, Jessica mentioned it, but the little parklets, I saw that this summer in Crested View, Colorado, and it was really amazing. The synergy, I think, that happens when you create those in unexpected spaces. And so there was a lot of excitement about kind of being able to dine and it was in Crested View, if you've ever been there, there's just one main drag and those parklets were there, but the traffic seemed to behave itself. So that's my wonder if that'd be interesting, and maybe around Cowboy Jack's or other places where there's down around Stonehouse or, other places.
San Antonio has that too, not in the downtown, but in the, where the old Pearl Brewery used to be. Have y'all?
Yeah.
It's really, really neat. I just saw that a few months ago. And it doesn't have necessarily parklets, but it has like one big green space area, and restaurants kind of surrounding it. That's really neat and really good for people with children. My wonder if is super conflicted. The picture that I think that was in Larissa's PowerPoint of somebody walking down a more modernized downtown had a really wide sidewalk that seemed to mesh really well with the rest of downtown. And I know that we have really beautiful old brick streets that we wouldn't need to and maybe wouldn't want to sacrifice. But I think obviously walkability is a huge thing in downtown.
I always loved that it is the center of gathering for the whole town. I was just Christmas parades and everybody loves that. But I happened to be walking in the parade. So one of my concerns was that even the streets, a lot of people, because we gather just different reunions, it is just even the flexibility to be able to, to put all the people in. It's not big enough to be able to do, because we gather together. And this is a place where we can go. I just feel that some people were sitting on streets that were not really for them to see it. So even just the streets, because we utilize it all the time. So even thinking about all the cultural things or the events that we have, because we use it all the time. So people that whenever we have those events, that they can even just feel comfortable just sitting on the streets. I mean, that's something so simple that a lot of the families and things and kids were just sitting down in places where you cannot really sit down. So just something as simple as that. And also for the kids, as Amelia was mentioning about, it's a great opportunity to take our own kids. I don't remember, maybe I have not taken my kids enough there because there's not a lot of things for them, attractive things to see as far as family, just to go. But I think that we need to start also creating the love of our little ones for downtown, because that's going to be our next generations that are going to be sitting here talking about how can we renovate and keep the love for downtown.
You know, excuse me, I'm gonna add to what Councilor Fisherman said. My wife and I did summer work recently in Branson, Missouri. And I like the family environment they've created. You know, they have moved to the side and several of the streets have been closed in where you have wonderful shopping. But it was the family environment that really caught my attention. The families with the kids and that commitment, engagement. And so my mind went back to visual. And I said, you know, wouldn't it be great in Nacogdoches, just south of downtown, north, back there behind, used to be old Casey Mark, I'm old enough to remember. Those streets, they were closed off and walking and just great stores and activities for families and kids to be shopping in that area. If I was staying at Fredonia Hotel, I'd just walk across. And there's so much more shopping, but it's the family environment catches my attention, that the young families, because like you said, they are a future. And have that type of environment in Nacogdoches would be tremendous.
That's great, because I swear I'm thinking like the exact same thing that they're all thinking. You know, one about families and about, like in Nacogdoches, if you want to, your family want to go somewhere, well, you might go to Pecan Park, or you might go to Lake Nacogdoches, or you might come downtown, but probably not, unless you're going to go to the brewery. The brewery's been kind of nice because sometimes there's families there and kids running around, but that just limits it to people who want to drink beer. And we need it broader than that. And the other thing I was thinking too, how a place where everyone wants to go, a body of water is always a draw. Like the ag pond at SFA, if we had an ag pond down there next to downtown or something, people would come have a picnic, and they would come go shopping, then they would do different things like that. But that's probably really hard, challenging to do. It's just how I was thinking, I wrote it down, maybe instead of a body of water, if we had, especially if we had closed off streets or had a little pocket park or something, not a pool, but maybe a bunch of spray stations and little splash places, kind of scattered throughout downtown for adults and kids. And the other thing about that is summers are getting hotter, and they will keep on getting hotter. And we need to, and planning for that. And we want people to be outdoors, that, you know, outdoors is so beautiful out there. And people in the summer and in more and more of the year won't go outdoors because it's too hot. But if we, you know, have a city that's really cool and wet, we have fans and water everywhere, we don't have to have a ag pond. We can just have water everywhere. And people will come out for that, won't they? No? So that's my idea.
I don't really have anything yet. I missed the last meeting and I need to do all my reading, but I like the idea of the splash areas. I mean, you see those places where the kids are going nuts, the people are just hanging out by those areas where kids can run safely.
Yeah.
I was always wondering, I like the Blueberry Festival and all the things they had going on, but they're generally really hot.
Yeah.
So I wonder if we could stretch something between the buildings and have shade, you know, maybe not the entire street, obviously, but just a little pocket over here, a little pocket over there, and you could make, you know, like Art Deco type stuff or something, whatever you want to put up there. I don't know.
Good idea.
Mark? I'm wondering, and it's a big ask of the city group here, is can we look at some iconic downtowns from around the nation? Or even around the world, because, you know, I've been in some massive squares in Zurich, Switzerland, Pasadena, California, Nacogdoches, Texas. They're all old, and they all have different things about them. And I hope we get to look at some of those bigger examples and not just limit ourselves to Main Street, Texas.
I like the way you're thinking, Mario. And in fact, we're going to, next time, is that right? We are actually going to look at both good and bad pictures, just to try to tweak our minds and go sort of through a slideshow. And we're actually going to even do that in, this was this town 20 years ago, this is this town today. And they go both ways. You know, some didn't do so well and some of them did really well. So that's, I love it. And the idea of adding things that we will never become still are worth looking at. And so that's a great idea. Good. John?
I'll hunt if I may.
Thanks.
You
Actually, we have your, it was in the 1970s.
Anything specific, but bring this process that you started together into what we're really supposed to do and any consultant is supposed to do, which is pull all the bits and pieces together, the beautiful, the elimination of the ugly, conversion, not elimination, but conversion to something else. The practical connection of them with sightline, shade. The idea of get out of the sun. It's all right there in downtown. And the challenge is to, in an affordable way, pull it all together so that it feels like one place. There are a lot of specifics. I could list them for the next half hour, but I promise not to.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Great.
I kind of think that any and all ideas or plans for downtown require one common denominator, and that's parking. And I don't have a solution for that, but it's a question.
Well, that's a good one, and I've said in that very committee one time at SFA 30 years ago, that there was no parking and never even parking garages. So, I wondered every time I've gone to visit, like if you go to a resort or you go to Disney World or you go to pretty neat defined spaces like the Strand at Galveston, you know when you're there because you arrive in grand entrances. And I jog a lot. A lot of times when I'm there, I'll jog and I see the non-grand entrances, which is usually for service trucks and things like that. And I wonder if we couldn't fix that, because to be honest, every entry into our downtown area is more like a service truck entry than it is you've arrived at downtown as a destination. And so that's just one of my things I wondered if. And we're going to play those games a lot as we go along, because I think some of those we'll quit wondering about them and they'll move into what recommendation do we need to make so that happens. But those are the kinds of things you ought to have on your mind when you make that detour off the interstate over the holidays to look at that other town. That's the kind of thing you ought to have in your mind when you're driving around through Nacogdoches and or we're walking around in a couple of a month, or when you're reading these plans and you're thinking, how does this all come together and how do we define that into kind of experience? I mean, one of the things we'll be working on is, what experience do we want them to have in our downtown? Because that affects all the above, entrances and things like that. If we, so we have to think through that a little bit. I mean, obviously, if we were gonna, Betty, before she left, was saying everybody downtown is freaking out again because they've heard we're looking at the 1974 plan, which closes all the streets downtown. And trust me, the next Main Street Board meeting will be blowing up. It's great. Bring it on. But obviously, if we were to do that, then the entrances, that I was envisioning are completely different than if it's a driving downtown. And the same goes with all these. Can you make it family friendly? It's family friendly one way if the streets are closed. It's family friendly another way if the streets are open. And so as we come together, we'll always try to have a little time like this when we just keep prodding each other to think outside of the box so that eventually we can come together with a plan. Questions, Susie?
So I keep hearing that downtown can't do anything because of the water mains and the sewer and all that stuff. So even if we dream about some of these things, is it ever a possibility because the infrastructure is not there to even start the dream? I mean, which goes first? Do you build the dream and then hope that your infrastructure comes, or do you fix the infrastructure and then you're able to dream? So is it bad enough that we can't dream yet, or is it fixable?
Well, I think the answer, and if I'm wrong, I'm sure somebody from the city will chime in now. I believe that this committee, we're not elected, we're appointed, and we're here to make recommendations to take downtown in a direction that we help define and clarify. And then ultimately, whether it's planning and zoning, if it's public works, if it's the city commission or the city manager, they then have to look at those recommendations, and some of those may or may not be possible. They may conflict with a law or a rule or regulation. But I think that comprehensive plan is actually looking at all that too. And so it'll be an alignment of it. But at the end of the day, all we can do is make recommendations to the city commission from our next, 12 months worth of work. And then what the city commission would do probably is accept some or all of those recommendations. And then those things would be divided out. Like, for instance, I serve on the Main Street Board. Some of those are going to come to the Main Street Board. And we're going to be basically being told, you need to figure out how to do this. Some of those might go to Public Works and say, you need to help us figure out what it would take so that we can go back to the city commission and look at budgeting.
Also, staff and council are currently actively and aggressively looking at infrastructure, fixes, replacements, all of that. And one of those are down.
Yeah, we're free to very much. Yeah. Other questions from today? Anybody got anything they want to ask any of our three city folks that gave us some information? Well, I just want to remind you, drive through downtown, drive through some other town, and look at the plans, study the plans so that when we come back next time on January 12th, we can take another step. Ann?
I had one suggestion. Would it be a good idea or something if we had like a little email group that like when we're traveling, if we see a picture of something, we can like share it with each other or something like that?
You can. In fact, in the material they put on your desk today, that's a great point, Ann, is updated and accurate email list. So if you've got the old one, throw it away because there are little things on there you might not know they're different, but they mean a lot. So like Larissa was sending me stuff to get ready for a meeting we had, and I was like, you didn't send me anything, and everybody else at the table had it. I'm feeling sorry. I thought, yeah. Only to learn that she dropped one M or I dropped one M when we made out the email. So, and if somebody eventually takes a picture and emails that entire group, voila, you will have our email.
Yeah, okay.
So,
All right.
all right. See you on January 12th, and if there are no other questions, thank you all. We appreciate it.
And please get coffee and stuff like that.
Yeah, you are. Oh, yeah.